Kepler Station, Guardians of the Helix Nebula, Cosmic Horror Story. Dr. Aris Thorne's fingers danced across the holographic display, adjusting the quantum resonance scanners with practiced precision. The observation deck of Kepler Station offered an unparalleled view of the Helix Nebula, its spiraling arms of cosmic dust painting purple and gold across the infinite black. After 6 months of isolation in this remote research outpost, the spectacular view had become both companion and tormentor, a constant reminder of how far they were from anything resembling home. "You're working late again," came a voice from behind. Communications specialist Zara Oduya entered the deck, carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee that still managed to taste remarkably like the real thing. Her Nigerian accent added musicality to her words, a familiar comfort in the sterile environment of the station. "The anomaly readings are getting stronger," Aris replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. The warm ceramic cup felt solid against his palms, anchoring him to something tangible. "Whatever's out there, it's moving closer." Zara's expression darkened as she studied the data streams floating between them. "Command wants hourly updates now. They seem concerned." They both knew what that meant. In the decades since humanity had established its network of deep space research stations, unexplained phenomena had been documented but rarely discussed. The Kepler Station, positioned at the edge of charted space, had been designed to study the Helix Nebula's unique energy signatures. What they'd found instead defied every known law of physics. The first incident had occurred 3 weeks earlier. Maintenance tech Chen Liu had been conducting routine repairs on the station's exterior when his tether line simply vanished. Not severed, not damaged, simply ceased to exist. Chen had been spinning off into space, screaming incoherently about the spaces between spaces, before Aris had managed to activate the emergency retrieval beam. Chen remained in the medical bay now, catatonic, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. "Have you heard from Dr. Voss lately?" Zara asked, referring to their station commander who had locked herself in her quarters 5 days ago, claiming she needed to commune with the stellar consciousness. Aris shook his head. "She hasn't responded to any communications. I'm starting to worry we might have a real problem on our hands." As if in response to his words, the entire station shuddered. Not the familiar vibration of thrusters firing or docking procedures, but something deeper, like reality itself had hiccuped. The holographic displays flickered, and for a moment the stars outside seemed to shift position. "What the hell was that?" Zara grabbed the edge of the console as another shudder ran through the station's superstructure. Aris's fingers flew across his controls, accessing the station's sensor array. Energy spike off the charts. Something's emerging from the nebula. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, they watched in awe and terror as space itself seemed to fold. The stars behind the phenomenon bent and twisted, creating impossible geometries that hurt to perceive directly. Where there had been empty space moments before, something vast and incomprehensible now occupied the void. "My God," whispered Zara, "what is it?" The thing, if it could be called a thing, defied description. It appeared to be simultaneously solid and ethereal, existing in dimensions that human eyes could barely process. Its surface, if surface was the right word, rippled with colors that had no names, shifting between states of matter that shouldn't be able to coexist. "It's not just one object," Aris realized, studying the sensor data with growing horror. "It's multiple entities, hundreds, thousands. They're all connected, sharing some kind of collective consciousness." The communications array crackled to life, flooding the deck with sounds that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in their bones. It wasn't language in any conventional sense, but something deeper, emotions and concepts transmitted on frequencies that human biology had never evolved to process. "I can feel them," Zara gasped, pressing her hands against her temples. "They're not trying to communicate. They're trying to understand us. We're like insects to them, curious insects that have built a tiny metal hive in their territory. Aris felt it too, the sensation of being examined by intelligences so vast and alien that human thought was little more than static noise. But there was something else, something that chilled him to his core. These entities, whatever they were afraid. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Warning klaxons began to sound as systems began failing throughout Kepler Station. The lights flickered and died, plunging the observation deck into darkness broken only by the emergency lighting strips along the floor. "Power's failing," Aris reported, his voice strained. "They're draining our systems somehow." Through the viewport, the entities began to shift and flow like liquid starlight. They moved with purpose now, surrounding the station in patterns that reminded Aris uncomfortably of predators circling prey. But there was something else in their movement, a desperation that spoke of urgency beyond human comprehension. "We need to evacuate," Zara said, but even as she spoke, they both knew it was impossible. The station's shuttle bay had been the first system to fail. They were trapped, floating in the void with beings that existed beyond the boundaries of known physics. The communications array erupted again, this time with something that might have been an attempt at human speech. The words, if they were words, came in fragments and concepts rather than coherent sentences. "Danger, fracture, containment failure, prison." Aris and Zara exchanged glances. "Prison," Aris whispered. The entities surged forward, pressing against the station's hull with increasing urgency. Where they touched the metal, strange transformations began to occur. The hull plating began to shift and flow like liquid, taking on the same impossible colors as the entities themselves. "They're trying to get inside," Zara realized, "but not to harm us. They're running from something." As if her words had summoned it, the nebula itself began to change. The beautiful purple and gold clouds darkened, taking on an oily, malevolent quality. Something else was coming through the stellar formation, something that made the entities seem almost benign by comparison. The thing that emerged from the nebula was darkness given form, an absence of light and matter that seemed to devour reality itself. It moved with purpose, spreading like a cancer through space, consuming everything in its path. The entities scattered before it, their previous fear now transformed into outright terror. "Dear God," Aris breathed, "the nebula isn't a natural formation, it's a containment field, and we just woke up whatever it was containing." The darkness reached for Kepler Station like a grasping hand, and where it touched, reality simply ceased to exist. Sections of the station's hull vanished without sound or explosion, leaving gaping wounds that opened directly onto the void between worlds. Through the breaches, Aris could see things that his mind refused to process fully. Impossible geometries twisted through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Time flowed backward and forward simultaneously. The very fabric of spacetime rippled and tore like fabric under the assault of whatever ancient horror had been imprisoned within the nebula. "The entities," Zara gasped, "they're trying to protect us." It was true. The strange beings that had first appeared so alien and threatening now positioned themselves between the station and the encroaching darkness. They fought with weapons that operated on principles beyond human science, wielding energies that turned the observation deck's displays into cascades of impossible data. But they were losing. One by one, the entities flickered and died, consumed by the darkness that pressed forward with inexorable patience. Each loss sent ripples of what might have been grief through the station's communication systems. "We have to help them," Aris said suddenly. "Whatever they are, they're sacrificing themselves for us." "How?" Zara demanded. "We're just human. We don't have weapons that can fight something like this." Aris's hands flew across the controls, accessing systems that had been dormant since the station's construction. "Maybe we don't need weapons." The entity said something about a fracture, a containment failure. What if the nebula isn't just a prison? What if it's part of the mechanism that keeps that thing contained? Understanding dawned in Zara's eyes. The energy readings we've been monitoring, they're not just random phenomena. They're part of a vast machine designed to keep that horror imprisoned. The station shook violently as another section vanished into nothingness. They had minutes at most before the entire structure would be consumed. But now they had a purpose, a reason beyond simple survival. The quantum resonance scanners, Aris said urgently. If we can recalibrate them, amplify their output, we might be able to reinforce the containment field. They worked in desperate synchronization, their hands dancing across controls as they reprogrammed the station's most advanced equipment. The quantum resonance scanners, designed to study the nebula's unique properties, could theoretically be reversed to strengthen rather than analyze the containment field. Outside, the last of the entities made their stand. Their numbers had dwindled to a handful, but they fought with renewed ferocity, buying precious seconds for the humans to complete their work. "Power levels are dropping fast," Zara reported. "Whatever we do, we have to do it now." Aris initiated the modified scan sequence, and the station's entire sensor array came alive with energies that made their teeth ache. The quantum resonance field spread outward from Kepler Station like ripples in a pond, interacting with the nebula's natural containment properties. The effect was immediate. The encroaching darkness slowed its advance, held back by the reinforced energy field. The remaining entities surged forward, adding their own power to the containment effort. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually succeed. Then the darkness adapted. It began to change, shifting its nature to counter the containment field. The ancient horror was learning, evolving in response to their desperate gambit. "It's not enough," Zara realized. "We're just delaying the inevitable." Aris stared at the data flowing across his displays, his mind racing through possibilities. There had to be something else, some way to permanently reinforce the prison that had held this thing for eons. "The entities," he said suddenly. "They're not just prisoners, they're guards. They've been maintaining the containment field from the inside. That's why they were so curious about us. They haven't had contact with anything from outside in millennia." "So what do we do?" Zara asked. Aris made a decision that would haunt him for whatever remained of his life. "We give them our station. The quantum resonance field needs a stable power source. If we transfer control to them, they can maintain the containment indefinitely." "But that means—" "I know what it means," Aris interrupted. "We either die here or we die running. At least this way our deaths might mean something." The station shook again, and this time they could hear the tortured groan of metal under impossible stresses. The darkness was adapting faster than they'd anticipated, finding ways to counter their reinforced containment field. Zara nodded, her face pale but determined. "How do we do it?" Working together, they began the process of transferring control of Kepler Station systems to the entities. It was complex work, requiring them to rewrite fundamental protocols and bypass safety systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of override. The entities seemed to understand what they were doing. As the transfer progressed, the remaining beings began to flow into the station systems, their strange energies infusing the metal and circuits with something that was neither purely technological nor entirely natural. The darkness pressed forward again, and now they could feel its hunger, its ancient malevolence. This was a thing that had existed before stars were born, a fragment of the primordial chaos that predated the universe itself. Its very presence was anathema to ordered reality. "Almost there," Aris gasped as the station systems began to fail around them. Life support was shutting down section by section, and the temperature was dropping rapidly as power was rerouted to the quantum resonance array. The last of the entities poured themselves into the station's heart, their collective consciousness spreading through the circuits like digital wildfire. The quantum resonance field flared to impossible brightness, visible even to the naked eye as streams of pure energy flowing between the station and the nebula. The darkness recoiled, driven back by the reinforced containment field. For the first time since its emergence, the ancient horror seemed to hesitate, testing the boundaries of its new prison. "It's working," Zara breathed, even as the air around them grew thin and cold. But their victory came at a price. The transfer of control was complete, but Kepler Station was no longer theirs. The entities, now fully integrated with the station's systems, had become something new, a fusion of alien consciousness and human technology that existed solely to maintain the containment field. Aris and Zara found themselves in a small section of the station that still retained its original atmosphere and lighting. Beyond the bulkheads, they could hear the sounds of transformation as the entities reshaped their new home to better serve its purpose. "What happens to us now?" Zara asked quietly. Aris had no answer. They were alive, but they were also prisoners in their own station, dependent on the mercy of beings whose motivations they barely understood. The entities had accepted their sacrifice, but what that meant for their long-term survival remained unclear. Through the viewport, they watched as the darkness settled back into its prison, contained once more by the combined efforts of human technology and alien determination. The Helix Nebula resumed its normal appearance, beautiful and serene, hiding the cosmic horror that slumbered within. "Look," Zara pointed to the displays that still functioned in their small sanctuary. "The entities are trying to communicate." The screens showed complex patterns of data, slowly resolving into something approaching language. It was crude, probably the equivalent of shouting across a vast chasm, but the message was clear. "Thank you," Zara read aloud. "They understand what we did. They're grateful." "Grateful enough to let us go?" Aris asked. The response came slowly, as if the entities were struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in their experience. Finally, a single word appeared on the screen: "Soon." Days passed, measured by the artificial cycles of the life support systems that still served their small section of the station. The entities, now fully integrated with Kepler Station systems, worked tirelessly to maintain the containment field. Aris and Zara had become observers in their own outpost, watching as alien intelligences operated their equipment with a precision that no human could match. But something had changed in the relationship between human and entity. The initial fear and suspicion had given way to a strange kind of understanding. The entities, it seemed, had been alone for so long that the presence of human minds was a novelty they found endlessly fascinating. "They're learning from us," Aris observed one day, watching as the station systems operated in ways that defied their original programming. "Adapting our technology to their purposes, but also incorporating our perspectives into their consciousness." Zara nodded, studying the data streams that had become their only window into the transformed station. "It's mutual. I'm starting to understand their thought patterns. They're not just maintaining the containment field anymore. They're improving it." The containment field had indeed grown stronger, reinforced by the unique fusion of human technology and alien consciousness. The darkness within the nebula remained contained, but the entities had added layers of complexity to the prison that would make another breach virtually impossible. Why did they choose to stay? Zara wondered aloud. They could have fled when the containment field was weakening. They didn't have to sacrifice themselves to keep that thing contained. "Maybe they understand something we don't," Aris suggested. "Maybe they know that if that thing ever got free, it wouldn't just threaten this corner of space. It could unravel reality itself." The entities had been guarding the prison for millennia, perhaps longer. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, had watched humanity take its first tentative steps into space, and they had remained at their posts, knowing that their vigilance was all that stood between the universe and absolute chaos. We're not prisoners anymore, Zara realized suddenly. Look at the atmospheric controls. They're expanding our living space. It was true. Section by section, the station was being returned to human habitable conditions. The entities had completed their integration and were now restoring Kepler Station to something approaching its original state, albeit with significant modifications. They're giving us back our home, Aris said softly, but it's more than that. They're sharing it with us. The station that emerged from the transformation was neither fully human nor entirely alien. It was something new, a bridge between two forms of consciousness that had found common ground in their shared purpose. The quantum resonance scanners hummed with energies that contained elements of both human science and alien understanding. Dr. Voss emerged from her quarters, her eyes clear and her mind apparently restored. "I understand now," she said simply. "The stellar consciousness I thought I was communing with, it was them. They've been trying to communicate with us for weeks, but our minds couldn't process their presence properly." Even Chen Liu showed signs of recovery, though he remained in the medical bay, his eyes now tracking movement instead of staring blankly into space. The trauma of his encounter with the entities had been severe, but the integration of their consciousness with the station systems seemed to have a healing effect. "They want us to stay," Zara reported after spending hours in communion with the entities through the station's communication systems. "Not as prisoners, but as partners. They believe that our different perspective adds something valuable to their vigilance." It was an unprecedented opportunity. Humanity had made contact with an alien intelligence, but more than that, they had been invited to participate in a cosmic responsibility that spanned eons. The entities, for all their power and knowledge, had recognized something in human determination and creativity that they valued. "What about command?" Aris asked. "They'll want to know what happened here. They might try to evacuate us or worse, study the entities." "The entities have already thought of that," Zara replied. "They've been monitoring our communications. They've agreed to let us report to command, but with certain restrictions. They want humanity to know about them, but the containment field must remain their primary responsibility." The message they composed together, human and entity working in concert, would change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. But it would also establish a new kind of relationship between species, one based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Weeks turned to months as they adapted to their new reality. The station continued to function as a research outpost, but its mission had evolved. Now, in addition to studying the Helix Nebula, they were studying the entities themselves, not as subjects, but as partners in exploration. The entities revealed knowledge that spanned millions of years. They had witnessed the formation of stars, the birth and death of civilizations, the slow dance of galaxies through space. But they had also learned from their human companions, discovering new ways of thinking about problems that had puzzled them for centuries. "They want to expand the network," Aris explained one day, showing Zara complex schematics that had been developed through their collaboration. "Not just here, but to other potential containment sites throughout the galaxy. There are other prisons, other things that shouldn't be released." It was a daunting prospect. The universe, it seemed, was full of dangers that humanity had never imagined, but it was also full of wonders and allies in the most unexpected places. The darkness within the nebula remained contained, but its presence served as a constant reminder of what they were protecting. The entities had shared glimpses of what would happen if the containment ever failed completely, visions of reality unraveling, of fundamental forces breaking down, of a return to the chaos that had existed before creation. "Why us?" Zara asked the entities one day, through their shared communication systems. "Why did you choose to reveal yourselves to us, to trust us with this responsibility?" The response came not in words, but in a complex pattern of emotions and concepts that took them both time to fully process. The entities had been alone for so long, carrying the burden of cosmic guardianship without hope of understanding or assistance. The arrival of humans at the edge of their territory had been noticed, studied, and ultimately welcomed. You were curious, the entities communicated. You sought knowledge for its own sake, not for conquest or domination. You looked at our prison and saw beauty where others might have seen only danger. You were scientists, explorers, dreamers. You were worthy of trust. It was perhaps the highest compliment anyone had ever paid to humanity. In a universe full of dangers beyond imagination, the simple act of looking at the cosmos with wonder and respect had earned them allies of incredible power and wisdom. As the months turned toward a year, Kepler Station became something more than a research outpost. It became a bridge between species, a testament to what could be achieved when different forms of consciousness worked together toward common goals. Dr. Voss, fully recovered and integrated into their new reality, began documenting their experiences for eventual transmission to command. Her reports would be carefully crafted to convey the wonder and responsibility of their situation without triggering panic or military response. "They need to understand," she explained during one of their daily briefings. "This isn't a first contact situation that can be handled with protocols and procedures. This is a fundamental shift in humanity's role in the cosmos. We're not just observers anymore, we're participants." The entities had shown them glimpses of the larger picture, the network of containment fields that stretched across the galaxy, holding back forces that would otherwise consume everything humans had ever known or loved. It was a sobering realization, but also an empowering one. "We're not alone," Zara said one night, standing with Aris in the observation deck that had become their sanctuary. "We never were, we just couldn't see what was already there." The Helix Nebula had resumed its spectacular display, but now they understood what they were seeing. Not just cosmic beauty, but the visible manifestation of forces beyond human comprehension, working to keep the universe safe from threats that defied conventional understanding. "Command will want to send more people," Aris predicted. "Researchers, diplomats, probably military advisors. It'll change everything." "Maybe that's what needs to happen," Zara replied. "Maybe humanity is ready to take its place as a galactic citizen, to accept responsibilities that go beyond our own species." The entities had been maintaining the containment fields for longer than humans had existed as a species. They had earned their rest, their opportunity to share the burden with others who had proven themselves worthy of trust. As they stood together watching the nebula's eternal dance, both human and entity consciousness spread throughout the station's systems. Aris and Zara understood that they were witnessing the birth of something unprecedented, a true partnership between species, founded not on conquest or exploitation, but on mutual respect and shared responsibility. The universe, they had learned, was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. It was also more dangerous, but that danger was balanced by the presence of allies in unexpected places. "What happens next?" Zara asked the entities through their shared communication network. The response came as a complex tapestry of possibilities, futures that might unfold depending on choices yet to be made. Humanity could retreat, pretend this encounter had never happened, leave the entities to their eternal vigilance. Or they could step forward, accept their place in a larger cosmic community, and share the burden of guardianship. "We choose to step forward," Aris communicated back, speaking for all of them. "We choose to be partners, not just in this containment field, but in whatever other challenges the universe holds." The entity's response was warm, welcoming, grateful. They had been alone for so long, carrying responsibilities that would have crushed lesser beings. The arrival of humanity had been unexpected, but ultimately welcome. As Kepler Station continued its orbit around the edge of the Helix Nebula, both human and entity consciousness working in harmony to maintain the ancient prison. Dr. Aris Thorne and communications specialist Zara Oduya understood that they had become part of something far larger than themselves. They were guardians now, not just of human knowledge and exploration, but of cosmic order itself. The universe had shown them its darkest secrets, but it had also revealed its greatest wonders. They had looked into the abyss and found not despair but purpose. The story of what happened at Kepler Station would spread throughout human space, carried by the reports they transmitted back to command. It would be met with skepticism, fear, wonder, and ultimately acceptance. Humanity would have to grow up quickly, accepting responsibilities that came with knowledge of the larger universe. But for now, in this moment suspended between fear and wonder, two humans and countless alien consciousness worked together in perfect harmony, maintaining the barriers that kept the darkness at bay. They had found, not just survival but purpose, not just allies but friends. The Helix Nebula continued its eternal dance, beautiful and terrible, hiding secrets that would have driven lesser beings mad. But those who now tended its mysteries had found strength in their shared purpose, hope in their mutual trust. In the end, the greatest discovery at Kepler Station wasn't the entities, or the containment field, or even the cosmic horror imprisoned within the nebula. The greatest discovery was that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that sometimes the most profound partnerships could emerge from the most unexpected encounters. The universe was vast, dangerous, and wonderful beyond imagination. And now, humanity had taken its first steps into a larger role, guided by allies who had been waiting patiently for a species worthy of trust. The future stretched out before them, full of challenges and wonders beyond comprehension. But they would face it together, human and entity, guardians of the cosmic order, partners in the greatest adventure the universe had ever known. As the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, and the nebula pulsed with energies that held back the darkness, Dr. Aris Thorne thought about how much had changed since that first encounter. They had come to the edge of known space as explorers, seeking knowledge and understanding. They had found both, but they had also found something far more valuable. They had found their place in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined. The containment field hummed with renewed strength, powered by the partnership between species, maintained by trust that transcended the boundaries of biology and consciousness. It would hold, as it had held for millennia, as it would hold for millennia to come. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, other stations, other guardians, other partnerships waited to be discovered. The universe was full of wonders and terrors in equal measure, but it was also full of allies for those brave enough to seek them out. The story of Kepler Station was just the beginning. The real adventure, the adventure of humanity finding its place in a cosmos far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had dared to dream, was about to begin. But that was a story for another time, another place. For now there was work to be done, mysteries to explore, and a partnership to nurture. The universe was calling, and humanity had finally learned how to answer. The entities hummed with satisfaction through the station systems, their ancient vigilance lightened by the knowledge that they were no longer alone. They had found worthy partners in these curious, brave, determined beings who had stumbled into their territory and chosen to stay, to help, to share the burden. Together they would guard the darkness. Together they would explore the light. Together they would face whatever wonders and terrors the universe had to offer. The partnership between human and entity would become legend, a story told across the stars of how different forms of consciousness could work together in common cause. It would inspire other encounters, other partnerships, other guardianships. But for now, in this moment, there was only the hum of the containment field, the dance of the nebula, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. They had faced the darkness and found, not despair, but hope. They had discovered that they were not alone, and that the universe, for all its terrors, was also full of wonders and allies. The stars watched over them as they watched over the stars, a perfect circle of guardianship and discovery that would endure as long as consciousness existed to maintain it. The cosmic dance continued, and humanity had finally learned the steps. In the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.